Hello and welcome back to another edition of Viper Bites Primetime Previews. We are heading to Monday Night Football where we have the 7-8 Cleveland Browns heading to Pittsburgh to take on the 7-1 Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, take these records, crumple them up like a nice little notepad and throw them away because records do not matter when you're talking about the AFC North. Both these teams are still in contention for that wild card berth in the AFC, as there is a log jam in those last few spots to get in. But let's dive right into this tail of the tape here. Let's talk about the Cleveland Browns, and let's focus on Baker Mayfield, who faces a Steelers defense that has allowed 880 passing yards over the last 4 weeks. And you know what? They have 2 fewer interceptions than they do touchdowns allowed, having given up 6 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks. Now, Mayfield certainly isn't a thought in one QB leagues. He's not. Forget about it. Everything he's done leading up to this game does not let you believe that he can be a starter for your fantasy teams. Forget about that right now. In fact, you can't even trust him as a super flex option or a streaming option at any point here. Now, Mayfield has averaged an abysmal 13.76 fantasy points per game this season, and he has only broken the 20-point threshold once on one occasion back in week 5 against the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, over the course of the last 5 games, he has 7 touchdowns to go along with 8 interceptions while being sacked 10 times, including 5 times against the Packers last week. Oh yeah, and which he threw 4 interceptions in that game. Now, looking at that 5-game sample we kind of mentioned, Mayfield has but 1 game in which he produced 16 fantasy points. That's not even meeting the standard of 17 fantasy points that I use as a quality start. Forget about Baker Mayfield in this one. Now, Nick Chubb, he's one of 3 players, maybe 4 players with any kind of fantasy relevancy in this matchup, which is key here because this game is on Monday Night Football. And like I said, there's about 3 to 4 players here that you really can't replace come championship time should the unexpected happen. We know that any given time, Sunday afternoon, a player could test positive, and all of a sudden now you're scrambling, trying to figure out how to make this work. So in Nick Chubb's case, go out there and get yourself a nice insurance policy. Maybe Deante Johnson is still available on the waivers. Go out there and tab him right now as a backup in case something catastrophic happens here in championship week. Now, look, Chubb against Pittsburgh. The Steelers are one of the worst teams in the leagues at preventing running back production in fantasy. Now, over the last 4 weeks, 594 yards on the ground, 262 yards yielded in the passing game. Okay? They're allowing on average 33.65 fantasy points. What's that mean? Look, Chubb, 3rd in rushing yards this year, 1,143. He is also 2nd in runs over 20 yards or more. Now, Chubb, he may be considered one of the best pure running backs in the entire National Football League. And in 9 games for fantasy, he sits as the RB11 while averaging 16.9 fantasy points per game. And one has to expect, with how bad Mayfield has been and the Browns playoffs on the line, everything rests on the shoulders and legs of Nick Chubb heading into this one, who is coming off a 126-yard rushing performance that also saw him add 58 yards in the receiving game. Speaking of receivers, Jarvis Landry has produced exactly 1 more touchdown this season than I have. And he's played in 10 more games. Let's be honest here. Now, in the last 4 games Landry has played, he has seen 7 targets in each of those contests, including a 6-catch, 111-yard performance against the Ravens in Week 12. Now, that 100-yard performance has been the only one on the season thus far. And the next best game in terms of yardage was 71 yards, in which he posted way back in week number 1. Yeah, that's not what you're looking for as an option here. Now, Landry, he could be an option this week, especially if you've already got one of these big 3 players that we're going to talk about throughout this show, and you need that insurance policy. Landry could be that guy on Monday Night Football. Now, back in week 8, last time the Browns and the Steelers faced off, Landry had seen 10 targets, hauling half of them for 65 yards on his way to an 11.5 fantasy point day, which is serviceable to say the least. Now, Landry had put together 3 straight 14-point performances heading into last week's game against the Packers, in which kind of ended that little run he had going on. Now, when we talk about runs and going on, Donovan Peoples-Jones, he's been running down the field a lot, just not catching the ball. Now, he caught 1 of 6 targets for 5 yards last week. Yeah, you heard that right. 1 catch, 5 yards. And besides Landry, he may actually be the best option for the receivers for the Browns. It almost pains me to say this, but in 12 games, DPJ, 28 receptions, 483 yards in this passing attack. And I use the word attack very loosely here. I want to talk about the Browns offense. Now, look, I don't mean to kick a guy when they're down or team when they're down or a group of receivers when they're down, but the facts are the facts. 483 receiving yards leads this Browns team. You can't trust DPJ. You can't trust Hollywood Higgins. You can't trust Anthony Schwartz. Okay, now I may pile on just a little bit more here, but Odell Beckham Jr.'s 232 receiving yards with the Browns in 6 games is still the 6th most on the Browns right now. And if you want to take a look at it, he's got 248 more in 6 games with the Rams on 20 receptions. Okay, tight end position. Things got to get better, right? Not so much. Austin Hooper, David Njoku, Harrison Bryant, good luck. Check the injury report because that's about the only way that these tight ends have been sorted out at any point this season. If all 3 are available, none of them are available to you for your fantasy squads. That's just how it is. Now, even if one were to miss this game, I'm not sure I feel comfortable starting any one of them in a game in which you're facing a defense that is only allowing 6.48 fantasy points per game to the tight end position. And definitely would not be trusting any of them during championship week. So you know what? Let's move on. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers now. And let's shine a little light on Ben Roethlisberger right off the get-go. He hinted in a press conference here on, I believe it was Thursday, that this very well could be his last home game as a Pittsburgh Steeler, which basically just kind of confirms what the rest of us believed at the beginning of the season, that this was likely to be Roethlisberger's last. Look, say what you will about him the last couple seasons, but his 63,721 passing yards, that ranks currently 5th all time. His 416 passing touchdowns is good for 8th all time. You aren't starting him this week against the Browns, who over the last 4 weeks, they ranked 13th in fantasy points allowed, allowing 15.63 fantasy points per game over that period. Now, when the Steelers met the Browns back in week 8, Roethlisberger was sacked twice, was 22 of 34 for 266 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those 260 passing yards, that marked the 4th highest mark for Roethlisberger on the season. Yeah, sorry, Ben. Suit, you had a good career, my friend. Now, who has a bright future ahead of them? Running back Najee Harris. In 15 games, he has been as productive as they come in the running back world. Now, thanks in part to having a lot of volume and having Ben Roethlisberger becoming basically a check down connoisseur in his final season. Now, Harris has produced the 4th most fantasy points by a running back this season, not just by a rookie, but by a running back, and has averaged 17.4 fantasy points per game while rushing for nearly 1,000 yards. He's going to hit that 1,000-yard mark, and it's going to happen on this game. I guarantee you that. Now, I mentioned captain checkdown just a moment ago, and when you see Harris and what he's been able to do, he has accumulated 67 receptions for an additional 422 yards. Yeah, and you know what? Maybe it's because Ben's arm isn't what it once was. Maybe it's the Steelers knowing what they can do within this offense, and maybe has everything to do with this Steelers offensive line. We've seen Harris get hit in the backfield more times than we care to count. Or maybe it's a combination of all 3. Who knows? But really, Harris has been one of the few bright spots for the Steelers offense so far this season. Now, in 3 of the last 4 games, Harris has over 100 scrimmage yards, while the Browns, they've allowed only 258 rushing yards in their last 3 games and have allowed the 12th fewest fantasy points per game over that stretch at 19.53. Harris was the 2nd player you need to worry about having that insurance policy in place and having this one, and you may be wise to stick him in your flex position to give you a little bit of flexibility if something were to happen. Now, player 3 that is definitely a start no matter how you want to look at it is Deante Johnson. He is that third player in this primetime preview that I feel comfortable starting on all my fantasy squads. What can I say? Deante Johnson, he is perhaps quarterback proof. Okay, well, maybe let's not go that far yet, but I have to admit when I'm wrong, and I didn't see a path in which Johnson would be even better this year than he was last year, given the fact that the Steelers' offensive line is what it is, given the fact that Ben Roethlisberger's arm is what it is. Now, he has turned all this in somehow into wide receiver 7 production on the season. Consider Johnson a low-end wide receiver 1 this week, and you know what? Just about every other week that you can imagine, especially when you're facing a Browns team that is allowing 35.7 fantasy points per game over the last 4 weeks, and considering he saw 13 targets, hauling in 6 of those targets the last time these teams met, which led to 98 yards. Now, Johnson, 92 receptions, 10th most in the league. 1,079 yards, 10th most in the league. 7 touchdowns, 14th most in the league. No matter how you look at it, Johnson has been good. But if you're looking forward, there may be a little bit of concern here, especially how this quarterback position works out moving forward. Mason Rudolph and Dwayne Haskins, clearly not options. This year's draft class, I'm not big on. Could Minshew Mania travel from Philly to Pittsburgh in 2022? Stay tuned. Could happen. Now, as far as the opposite of Diontae Johnson, you have Chase Claypool. And like Jarvis Landry for the Browns, he has 1 more touchdown than I do this season. Now, credit where credit is due here. Claypool does have 806 receiving yards. He does have 51 receptions, which I'm sure the Browns would love that type of production from any of the receivers right now. I say that production, not Claypool himself, because pretty confident Browns fans want nothing to do with Claypool. Now, Claypool, he's been okay-ish. 11.1 fantasy points per game, does carry some flex value in deeper leagues. But besides the maturation of Chase Claypool, which hasn't happened, neither have scoring touchdowns. He has 1 single touchdown this year after scoring 9 of them last year. That propelled him 214 fantasy points. This year, he's sitting at only 144, failing to reach double-digit production in 3 of his previous 4 contests. Last time Claypool met the Browns, 45 yards on 4 catches. Yeah, I don't see double-digit production coming this week either. Now, the one guy you really want to pay attention to is Pat Freiermuth. If he is healthy, he is that 4th player on this list that I feel comfortable recommending in this one, as long as he clears those concussion protocols prior to Sunday morning kickoffs. That's the key there. Sunday morning kickoffs. If he hasn't cleared yet, pivot to another tight end. Now, look, the Browns, they have been the 7th worst team at defending opposing tight ends over the last 3 games, allowing 16.4 fantasy points. And we all know what a healthy Pat Freiermuth can do. And in this offense, and with Ben Roethlisberger, they've been on connecting at a different level. And Freiermuth has had an excellent rookie campaign because of that. Look, a campaign that has witnessed him becoming a borderline tight end 1 in fantasy, recording 133 fantasy points in 14 games. And thanks to his ability to score tutties, and we love ourselves some tutties in fantasy football, he has 7 of them, including 6 in the last 8 games. So if Freiermuth is healthy and if he's cleared those protocols, he is in your lineup this week going for that championship glory. With that all being said, want more advice, want more tidbits of information, head over to fantasypoints.com. They've got you covered there. I promise you that. Also, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button here on the Vipers Network. Maybe toss up a couple thumbs up for us. Greatly appreciated. And if you are watching or listening to us on Apple, Spotify, Anchor, whatever the podcasting platform may be, take a second, rate and review the show. And as always, Twitter handle, Matt Donnelly, FF. Hit me up. Starts and sits, waivers, trade advice, rankings. I got you covered here. So make sure to hit me up and I'll get you taken care of the best way I can. Till next time. See you then.